And we are live with the Sean Chandler podcast for the Guy at the Movies Virtual Film Festival. Joining me shortly will be Griffin, and my computer's going wacky on me as it did yesterday. Joining me shortly will be Griffin Schiller, but the actual brain behind the Guy at the Movies Virtual Film Festival, Joe, is joining me for the moment. Hey, Joe, how's it going?
Oh, fantastic, Sean. Thanks for having me on. And we have a Griff is jumping on right now, so I'll just add him.
Excellent.
Hello. How's it going, everyone?
We're doing good. You are literally only 10 seconds late. So you've literally, I said, hey, Joe, well, thanks for having me. And then you joined in. So very good timing.
All right.
Got a new set there.
Good.
We switched clothes. I'm in the tank top today, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. I know. I should have. I was thinking about wearing one, but then I was like, I got to be classy. This is a film festival, and then here's Sean in his tank top. Yeah. So it turns out that I really had the right idea all along.
Yeah, I messed this one up. But so, Joe, you have decided to do this 3-day long virtual film festival. What was the idea behind it? And what are some of the fun things you've done over the last couple of days?
Yeah, I like pain and stress, so that's pretty much why.
Same.
No, Sean, you can attest to this because you and I've talked about this in the past. One of the things that I've loved about getting Guy at the Movies going over the past year is meeting all the different people that I have. I mean, that's how I came to get to know you. It's how I've talked with Griff and countless other people. And, the thing that I think is troubling for a lot of us when we're on here is that we can get stuck in our own bubbles. And unless you're going out there and you're making an effort to devour new content or find new individuals to follow or learn from, it can be a challenge. So I just thought, while we're all still dealing with COVID in the States and trying to figure out what the next, what theaters are going to look like in the next couple of months now that they're reopening and all that jazz, getting people together to just have some fun in an organized fashion and be exposed to some channels and individuals that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise would be a good way to go. And so that's what we've been doing between watch-alongs, some chats with some filmmakers. We've done some live podcast recordings, obviously doing this one right now. Yeah. And yesterday, I think, was actually my favorite day because we had a lot of, for lack of a better term, educational sessions. Yeah. And you kind of kicked it off with creating desirable content, but, learning from Rachel Reviews how to deal with difficult, toxic fandoms and hearing some of her experiences, talking with, Paul McGuire Grimes about finding your voice as a film critic. All that stuff has just been really beneficial.
So thank you so much for putting this all together. I can only imagine how much work went into this. Because it's legitimately 2 solid days of content, trying to organize all of that. And you've been kind of running in the background on all of them. So just the time of sitting there making it happen, that is incredible. Griffin, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Other than, the usual internet issues, which I literally just switched studios, so I had to deal with that whole hoo-ha. Other than that, I'm doing pretty good, and I'm actually happy to have sort of revamp things a little bit. I have a proper desk. I have a chair that doesn't squeak every time I move in it, so that's amazing. So yeah, everything's going pretty good over here.
So on today's episode of the podcast, we, of course, are going to kick things off, and we're going to talk about the life of Chadwick Boseman. We will not be doing any speculation as to the future of the MCU. We will not be doing any of that. So no reason to ask any questions. Yeah. We're just not going to do that. This is not the time just yet. I understand why some people are curious and why your brain might naturally gravitate in that direction. But right now is the time to look back at what he did and not speculate as how he'll be replaced. That's totally distasteful to me. We'll talk non-spoilers. We'll talk about the New Mutants. All 3 of us did see the movie, and I believe we all had 3 pretty different takes on it. And then just kind of discuss going back to the movies and a little bit of box office because we're getting this weekend's numbers in. And so for the first time in 6 months, we actually have box office numbers. And it's interesting to talk about because it's what do you do when 2/3 of the market is closed down and all kinds of weird stuff like that. So fun times. Joe, glad you could join us in on this conversation. It's always nice to have new voices on this. And if anyone is checking this out, be sure to look at all the other videos that have taken place throughout the Guy at the Movies Virtual Film Festival. Be sure to follow Guy at the Movies both on YouTube as well as on Instagram. He's got a ton of stuff over there. He's done some really interesting stuff that like I hadn't even thought about. Like he interviewed me on his Instagram. And I just thought that's a cool idea. I should probably look into doing stuff like this. So be on the lookout for him. He's doing a bunch of real innovative stuff. Also, as always, be sure to follow Griffin at FilmSpeak. And let's get started talking about this tragic news that dropped. Was that Friday night or Friday night? And I would assume for all of us, absolutely floored us, came out of nowhere. My family had gone to go see Jumanji, the original one, at the drive-in. And because all the constraints of right now, you can't get out of your car. You can't turn your car around and sit in the back seat. So our whole family was trying to cram into the front seat of the van. And I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'll just play on my phone. And I'll sit in the back. So I was sitting on the fact, just kind of playing on my phone. It's Texas, so it's still 100 degrees, even though it was pitch black outside, just sweating and scrolling through my phone. And then I saw that mutual friend of Griffin and I, 1 Minute Critic, had shared that the Associated Press article that Chadwick Boseman had died, and I was like, that's not right. That can't be right. So started to check it. Like, was this one of these internet pranks? So let me see, get the real information on this. It's like, wait, that was Associated Press. That's the real thing.
Yeah.
Wow. What is this? And then you find out that it was a four-year battle, and which means for the time that he was A-list. I mean, he's been starring in movies before that, but like that A-list where everybody knows who Black Panther is, and then making such an important impact when you've discovered that like that whole time that we were watching him, he was in the middle of this struggle. It's just such a gut punch. It's one of those ones that just hits you so much harder, especially when it comes to the superheroes. We see them so strong. We see them as figures of just confidence and overcoming obstacles that it's just so tragic when you have this follow up to it. And I mean, the immediate kind of comparison that would come to mind would be the accident with Christopher Reeves 25 years ago, where Superman, his neck was broken and he was in a wheelchair for the last 10 years of his life. And that would just kind of shook people when it happened. And then, happening again now. Griffin, what was your kind of experience with this?
I was at I was kind of at a loss for words, just because immediately you think of the body of work that he had and the incredible like performances he gave us, and then also just the way he carried himself off camera. And then I think about like, how much more he had left to give us, and how just incredible of a talent he was. Super kind, super humble, very like he did things because he knew it was going to better his people, for lack of better words. He didn't take roles that were stereotypical. He sought to break the norms and bring these heroic historical Black figures to life. And then also, the fictional Black heroes. I mean, representation was clearly something that was very important to him. And if you look at all the roles that he selected, he was very strategic in what he did, leaving a legacy behind him that I think is so powerful. And the kind of performer that he was, when we look at all the action films that he's done, he's not your typical action hero. He was very he was the strong silent type, but every time you saw him on camera, there was like a gravitas to him that was just something to behold. So he's gone way too soon. And for me, I don't know if I've ever been this affected personally by a celebrity death like this, at least not since Robin Williams,
right?
And again, kind of hitting in the same sort of just like, well, that can't be true, right? So
right,
yeah, and just the bravery that it took for him to go about doing all these massive action feature films and stuff like that. I mean, he shot Black Panther knowing the outcome. I mean, that's just you got to think about that. That's really brave individual, and he will surely be missed.
Joe, what was kind of your experience with this horrible news?
Yeah, I echo everything that you and Griff said. It really caught me off guard. I think I yelled a few expletives and was surprised. But as much as he was iconic in the roles that he took on screen and playing some iconic roles in the nonfiction world, he also was such a powerhouse off screen, and what he would do for charity and visiting children who are suffering from cancer and not knowing, or us not knowing, that he was suffering as well. And with personal experience in my family of colon cancer, but seeing how the treatments really take everything out of you, his strength is amazing to me.
Right.
And I think also, one of the reasons, Griff, not speaking for you, but one of the reasons that it really hits me hard is just his age. And, I'm not too far off from there. And
Sure.
Right.
It really kind of I don't want to say puts things into perspective. I think that's too cliche, but at the same time, it does really make you think about, your choices and how if someone like this could be like him, could be impacted the way that he was and lose his life over a battle. Like, the old saying is that cancer doesn't care. It will go anywhere it needs to go. And unfortunately, that's life.
Well, you bring that up. I mean, he was 4 years older than me, in which case he was diagnosed 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it just hits me right. I just see those numbers and I go, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it's very sobering. And, but yeah, let's spend a little bit of time just kind of talking about the rest of his filmography. Of course, Black Panther is the one that's so iconic. The movie made over $1 billion, made buku's crazy money here domestic. And then, of course, he was in Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. But Griffin touched on this a little bit, but he had this. He doesn't have the most robust filmography, but it's also a bunch of very intentionally selected things and a bunch of important roles. So the one that kind of put him on the map for me was 42. And I remember seeing the movie and thinking like, it's a solid movie. There's a few things about the way it's told that feels a little bit too much like a movie that's supposed to be like this, even though it was telling true things. But my takeaway was like, whoever this guy is, he just has something about him. And specifically his relationship with his wife in the movie felt like such a real relationship. It didn't feel like two movie characters. It didn't feel forced in the romance. It just felt like two people that were actually in love going on this very stressful adventure of trying to make it in baseball. And so it grounded a very larger than life baseball historic figure. And it all goes back to, just him being able to play both this strong historic person, but also the human in it too, the legend and the human. So that's the one that just stood out to me immediately. And it's one of those ones that like, I don't even know why that movie would have stood out to me in my memory of remembering the first time I watched it at the time. Because it's kind of, in a certain sense, it's kind of a random movie that I watched 7 years ago. But like the guy stood out. And I remember shortly afterwards when he was cast in Get On Up, watching John Campea on Movie Talk discussing the fact that, hey, the guy from 42 has been cast in Get On Up. I have no clue why I would remember that. That's a random event from 6 or 7 years ago, watching a random video on YouTube that I watched every single day. I watched the Movie Talk and I remember that. So what other ones for you, Griffin, kind of stand out to you when it comes to his career?
Honestly, Get On Up, he probably should have been nominated for, just because, I mean, if you think about it, if Rami Malek can be nominated for Bohemian Rhapsody, then Chadwick Boseman should have won the Oscar for Get On Up. Like, let's be real. So because he literally became Jackie Brown, James Brown. He literally did. He did all the performing, the singing, and all this stuff like that. It was a true transformative role for him. And when you just hear the story kind of about it, and how he sort of got involved, how he didn't want to do it, and then he had like a dream or like a vision or something that where James Brown was in it, and it sort of like gave him the okay or whatever. It's just like there's something just magical about that. The other one that I think is going to hit a little bit harder now is Da 5 Bloods. I feel like that watching that film, it just completely changes how you view it. And it's, I don't know, it's already a really tough watch and a really emotional film, but now there's like another added layer of like emotionality to it. So that one is that one's gonna be that one's really powerful. And I just think the way that his character in particular is painted in that film, it says a lot. I think you can draw a lot of comparisons to Chadwick Boseman, the person as well. So it's yeah, that one would probably be one of my new favorite ones for sure.
Yeah. Joe, how about you? What you're familiar with his career and what stands out to you?
Yeah, mine is definitely Marshall. So I don't share this all the time, but my background, or my current job, my real life job, so to speak, is a lawyer, and I love the Supreme Court history. So Marshall was just so fascinating to me because Thurgood Marshall was the first African American Supreme Court justice, and he started as a young black lawyer in pre-civil rights era. The pre-civil rights era, and that story is inspiring, phenomenal, and such a huge part of history that goes on to inform not only the civil rights movement but legal history and decisions for years and decades to come.
And just even in our discussion here, we've touched on almost every movie that he did. That's like a very high percentage of his filmography, and that's kind of the impressive part, is that he picked pretty intentional roles that hit on different things. And then even when he does a comic book movie, it's one that is incredibly important in the history of comic book films. And that's the legacy that he leaves behind of picking important roles and important stories to tell and doing a great job in all of them. And it's, as we've all said, it just feels just so shocking that he's just gone. He's just gone.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the other things was just like, that was weird for me was like, I got to sit down and have like a 20-minute conversation with him last year for 21 Bridges. Like I got to interview the guy and talk to him about like, New York City as a place, like his work in Black Panther, what like the upcoming Da 5 Bloods and like the stuff he had in mind for Black Panther 2. I felt like he was going to be a big creative force in that, and it's just like that, and like now understanding that he's not with us anymore, that's just really weird to me.
Right.
Granted, it was just like a brief encounter, but it was just like one of those things where you learn so much about a person and the kind of human being he was, and like just like such a bright spot in the world and everything. So I don't know, that was another thing that really just hit me, and I was kind of like, oh wow, that's really weird. I just talked to him last year. So
and I've heard several different kind of people on Twitter kind of share things like that, of like, you just never know when the last time you're going to talk to someone is. And you very rarely think it's the last time you're going to talk to them, especially with someone that young, that you just feel the sacredness of life and how it can just go away. I had a question come in from Shashank that I thought was a good one to kind of explore on this real quick, and then we'll kind of start discussing New Mutants. No spoilers, but Shashank said, what do you think is the thing about film stars that we have connection with them and we feel like we know a part of them? Well, I think that's the inherent nature of what they do, is to build connections with people, bring characters to life. The reason we connect with movies is because they capture something that, whether it's our escapist fantasies, they tell stories that connect with us. They tell stories of the past, of of his filmography. I mean, like half of it is biopics, where he's telling these important stories, and so he is the face of these incredibly important people, and helps you feel those stories in a succinct fashion. And then when all you know about him, we see the kind of the best of them, and that's kind of the part that sometimes they don't feel like people to us, because we see them in the movies and then we see them on the press tour, and we kind of get the highlight reel of the best about them. And so it's very easy to put them up on a pedestal, and sometimes there's, for all the good reasons, as we just connect with all the good that we see, or the joy that they brought to our life, or the insight that they gave us. And we're supposed to connect with them. That's everything that they're doing is designed for us to connect with them. So
Yeah.
What do you think of that, Joe?
I think you're spot on. I don't have too much more to add to that, but it goes back to the roles he took too. I mean, these were really impactful roles when he embodied people that, you know, were fighting for something, and so he kind of brought you along on those fights, on those in those battles, and then to learn that he was secretly, you know, battling something that we weren't aware of and weren't along for, so to speak, or at least, you know, it's devastating.
Right.
But I don't know. I think that it's probably too early, honestly, for any of us to say, like, what does this really mean to us, and what does that look like? But it's going to be something we think about for a while.
Yeah. Griffin, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you guys kind of hit the nail on the head with that one, so I'll just leave it at that.
So with that said, we'll kind of move on to the next subject. I just want to say that, you know, we're intentionally trying to be very respectful and sensitive in this. So we're not going to be discussing any sort of future talk on Black Panther 2 or MCU. That's just, we're only want to celebrate his life. And if you haven't seen 42, if you haven't seen Marshall, if you haven't seen Get On Up, check out these other things that he did. Go watch a number of the interviews that he did where you just see the guy, what he was passionate about. And you'll hear these stories that are really pretty incredible. But with that, kind of feels crass to move on, but to discussing New Mutants. So after roughly 1,000 delays and studio acquisition and 1,000 rumors of reshoots, varying reports as to what studio heads thought about the cut of the movie finally came out. I went to go see it Thursday night, my first movie back in the theaters, and we'll talk about our experiences going back to the theaters later on in this. So I went back to the theater. I went with my buddy Andy, who's a comic book guy, and my sister and brother-in-law, who are also hardcore comic book people. We saw it. All four of us enjoyed it well enough. Definitely had flaws. Definitely like, yeah, this was kind of weird. You could tell it was clunky, but we had fun with it and we enjoyed the characters. And I'd seen some of my YouTube buddies sharing similar thoughts that they'd enjoyed it. So I posted my reviews that enjoyed it, and then I went like, let me go check to see what's going on Rotten Tomatoes with this thing. 14%. 14%. There was one positive review at that point in time. Griffin, I saw you tweet about it. I believe the implication of your tweet was worst X-Men movie. So you appear to have had a different experience with it. What was your
yeah, so I think I tweeted that immediately after like just getting done with the drive in and I looking back on it, I was like, okay, that's not really how I meant it to come across. I was more referring to the fact that like people consider Dark Phoenix to be the worst. I've always actually kind of defended that movie. I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. But you know, obviously, let's be clear here. When you have a movie like X-Men Origins Wolverine, right, there's literally nothing else that could be possibly worse than that. Like that is just the bottom of the barrel, absolute trash. And then I also hate The Last Stand because I think that is just like an abysmal way to cap out a trilogy that just completely betrays everything that was set up in the first three films. So those two are the worst for me. Then we get to New Mutants, which I think is not a good movie. It's just I don't know, like it's absolutely nothing. It left absolutely no impression on me. I think because I went to the drive-in, so that was like a fun experience. So I was like willing to accept the movie even if it was a little like lame and stuff. But
did you have to sit in the trunk of your car, and was it 100 degrees in your car?
So actually it was at night. It was 10:30 at night. I went to go see it. So like it was actually fun, the atmosphere. But I did not sit in the trunk of the car. I watched it through my windshield. So all that stuff.
Lucky.
But yeah, right. I assume the theater was very hot where you were.
No, this is referring to when I went to see Jumanji on a Friday night with the family kicked me back. No, my theater was nice and climate controlled, comfortable. I was in a leather recliner. Yeah, I actually had a seat warmer if I did get cold.
Oh, interesting. Very fancy.
Sorry, I cut you off. Distracted you.
No, it's okay. So I'm just trying to think about New Mutants. It's just it was a movie that like I felt like the direction was absolutely lackluster. I thought the concept and the premise was really interesting. And they could have done so much with it, but they did nothing with it. It wasn't scary enough to really like play into the horror elements. It didn't feel I didn't get the teen sort of coming of age vibes that I was hoping. It was just like it was dipping a toe in like every single different like pond of like subgenres that I was trying to be, and it never really committed or became any of them. And also the movie's it's short, and I appreciated it because the movie was bad, but also like I didn't care about the characters, man. Like they tell you they're like they give these big, monologue dialogue sequences where they're like, okay, yes, this is their backstory, but I never really felt it, and I don't think they gave us nearly enough to care about them or get to understand them as people. The romance, both romances, while it was beautiful in one case, felt forced. The dialogue, oh my god, dude, the script for this, so bad. It was really, really bad, and the dialogue especially was atrocious, that to the point where like people like Anya Taylor-Joy and Maisie Williams, who I liked in the roles, couldn't even sell the lines that they were saying. Like, and then I don't know, it's kind of boring for like a good majority of it until the third act, like where the demon bear comes out and they're trying to redeem themselves, and I've just already checked out and the smiley men are coming up, and I'm like, okay, where was this like 2 hours ago? Even though the movie's not 2 hours, it felt like it was. So I don't know, man. It was just a bad movie. That's really all I have to say. Yeah,
so you give it like a 8 out of 10. B+,
right.
Is that what you're landing on?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. When I say bad, I mean good.
So you're saying, it's kind of weird the way that you can have such different interpretations, and like, I can hear some of the things you're saying, and be like, okay, maybe I could see why you could interpret it that way. I could see why that could be your experience with it. But at the same time, I was having fun. I was tracking along with it. Joe, where did you land on this one? Are you closer to Griffin or closer to Sanity? Me.
I'm right down the middle with it. I think New Mutants was fine. It wasn't the worst movie I've seen. It wasn't the best movie I've seen. I have a couple negatives that really impacted the way that I feel about it, even more so thinking about it afterwards. I think a lot of the casting was a little off, or very off. I wasn't sold on some of the actors that were in the roles. I think kind of like Griffin was talking about. I mean, I think it's an hour and 34-minute movie or something, or 38-minute. And I didn't know anything about any of the characters beyond what they told me. There was so much more to explore, especially even with the lead, to really get into the background of like why we have this demon bear coming. There was pieces of that, but still it just didn't feel fleshed out to me. But I had fun, and I don't know if part of that is like I was just happy to be back in a theater.
Right. That's what I wonder for me. It was like, hey, I'm hanging out with my sister. I barely get to see her. I'm hanging out with a friend. I barely get to see him. And I'm in a movie theater, and I'm in a recliner. It's comfortable.
This is wonderful. No, I thought for me, I think Anya Taylor-Joy and Henry Zaga were the two. I liked them. Henry Zaga didn't have much to work with, but I did like him in that role. No, you didn't like him?
Oh, no, sorry. I was agreeing with you that he didn't have much to work with. Yeah.
I was like, come on, Griff. Give me something.
I'll be clear. Whatever you say, Joe, I'm going to disagree with you.
But, outside of that, it was just, I completely agree with Griffin. There were some lines that I just rolled my eyes at when they were said. And, one in particular, what she calls the demon bear something. I don't know if that would be a spoiler or not, but I laughed, but I was like, oh my God, really? You threw that in here? So I don't know.
I like the scene. I like the scene before she goes into the magic portal and she's like, wait, but he's magic. And she's like, so am I. And I'm like, oh my God.
And you're like, you are?
I'm like, oh, get out of town. Really?
Yeah. I mean,
also, okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, just so much left unexplored, and that's I think what bothered me is like you're supposed to accept these characters as they are on screen and just be like, all right, well, this is what's going on. And again, the concept, like you said, the concept is great and was very intriguing. But it just I thought the execution was off, and I wanted to pull for these characters. I wanted to pull for the actors, really, just because I felt so bad for them. And, the Comic-Con panel with them, I enjoyed that. I thought they all were like, pleasant people that I would love to hang out with. But I don't know. It's a fine movie. Would I watch it again? Probably not, but it was fine.
Okay, so it debuted at Rotten Tomatoes at 14%. It's currently at 31%. In light of this information, Griffin, does that feel which number feels better to you? Is it a 14% or if 14% was debut? It's at 31 right now.
I think 31. Well, what's Dark Phoenix at? I guess because that's how I would judge it. Because I think for all of Dark Phoenix's faults, the first class X-Men crew still
Dark
manages
Phoenix
to sell the
22%.
emotional moments.
22%.
Yeah, see, I think that's a little low, and I'd probably say that New Mutants is around that 22% range right there. I think that's fair. So, say if we're going off of 14% versus 31%, I'd probably go with the 14%, even though I think that's even a little low.
Okay, Joe, what's your kind of? Does that feel right? Does that feel weird to you? What number feels right, reasonable to you?
I honestly, I think that makes sense. I would probably say a little bit more. I would be in the 40s, probably closer to 50, just because I do think that it's a down the middle movie. It was, yeah. I think it provided a nice outlet. It was fun when it needed to be, but it's not doing anything to further any of the stories within the MCU, or not that it's supposed to, but it's not really doing anything that's going to last.
Yeah, so for me, I left the theater, and I think anything from 40% to 70%, I would have been like, okay, I can see that. I can see where this is coming from. That makes sense to me. And then I looked and I saw 14%, and I think I almost went into defensive mode. Like I was on Twitter like, hey, look, this guy liked it. It's not like I wasn't like that positive on it in my review. I was positive. I did put a positive score on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm part of getting it up to 31%. My actually jump was from 22% to 25%, so that 3% was... Wow. I claimed that. But, but 14%, I was like, what? And especially the next day I went to see Bill and Ted. Bill and Ted is over 80%, and which is confusing to me in the same way of like that same one. I would like, if this is 40 to 70%, that would make sense to me. It's over 80%. So that just feels like so exaggerated to me. And in its own way, that like makes me inclined to, I don't know what. I didn't have an into that sentence, but it was a really good sentence, I feel. So anyway, it's just interesting how people have such different... I wonder how much both reading some of the things people said in my comment section, some of the stuff people were saying on Twitter, how much people are judging the movie based off of a series of other things besides the movie itself, whether the history, the delays, going in with a chip on their shoulder, and then there's a series of controversies surrounding it that have been kind of popping up recently. Yeah. And it seems like there's a certain group of people like just rooting for the movie to fail. Yeah. And so they're looking for things to criticize. But at the same time, I mean, if anybody told me this was their favorite X-Men movie, I'd think they're crazy. It's just clearly not that. But I think it has some stuff to offer. And I think that's what I tend to like things that bring novelty. That just feels like something different inside of something familiar. And I can have fun with the novelty of them. So the idea of like this self-contained story at this one location, it's kind of a horror story, kind of got Breakfast Club vibe to it. And then a girl's arm turns into a sword and she battles a bear demon. That's weird. Yeah. The novelty of that is kind of interesting to me. So from there, let's kind of move on. Oh, did you have thoughts?
I was just gonna say I agree with you on the novelty part. I just think I wish they would have played into that more. Like that was your selling point. That was the fresh, new, original take here. So let's play it up. Bring the horror elements to explore each character's personal demons. Don't just like half-ass it. I wanted to feel more camaraderie between the group. It all felt really artificial. So, but I agree with you. That was like my favorite parts were when they doubled down on doing that.
Yeah. So from there, let's kind of move on to just our general experiences with movies this past weekend. I went back to an actual theater on 2 occasions. Joe, you went to a real theater, normal theater?
I did.
And Griffin, you drive-in movie, right?
Yeah, drive-in.
Okay.
Yep.
So there's a lot of discussion about should they be open? What's it like? Do you feel safe? What precautions did they have? For me, I went, and it was basically an empty, gigantic lobby with very few people working. There was no line at concessions. There was like the person that was being served in front of me, and I was the only other person in the lobby. So when they left, I walked up, got served, walked into the auditorium. I couldn't see anyone in the room, and then I heard some voices like, "Oh, there's someone way up there." By the time the movie started, there were other people in the room, but not many. And we had our row entirely to ourselves, and so it felt like I was in an empty auditorium watching a movie. Some of that's because of the nature of the stadium seatings at the room that I was in. They played a whole video about how they sanitized the whole place between movies. Keep your mask on. Keep away from people. If you see someone want to give you a hug, run away from them. I mean, the whole deal. Next day, I went to a different theater. Same basic experience. Walked into the lobby. Almost no one is in there. Walk into the auditorium. No one else is on my row. I can see there's other people in there, but not many other people. So when I see some people being like real judgy on Twitter, like, how dare you, you're putting lives in danger. It's like, there just wasn't anyone around me. Maybe you're right. Maybe something will happen. This is not this is, what calls to mind a crowded theater and you're like bumping elbows with strangers. And if they cough, it's all over. Like, that was not remotely what happened. I went to 2 theaters that have assigned seating and have kind of spaced out seats so they can control how close you are to people a little bit. So I never felt in danger. I felt totally safe and away from humans that could give me a deadly disease. Joe, what was your experience like?
My experience is actually the same. I was in an IMAX theater, and there were no more than like 12 people throughout the entire theater, and that's a huge theater.
Let me pause. On that same note, I picked the largest screen in the northeast Austin area, central. So like this is like very much the best screen in this area, very central. Like this is a lot of Austin suburbs all feed into this theater. I picked the biggest one, the opening time, not many people in there. So it wasn't IMAX, but it was basically the same concept of that. The best, closest you could get to that. And same thing for Bill and Ted. First showing, a popular theater, not many people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. Continue.
No, you're total. And my experience was just like yours. I mean, everyone was wearing the masks. Everyone was social distancing. There weren't many people there in the lobby. Hand sanitizers everywhere. I took a little bottle myself, and I found myself like halfway through the movie not having touched anything, just sanitizing my hands like for the hell of it. So do with that what you will. A little OCD there, but I'll be going to see Tenet on Monday night, and that is going to be a little bit of a different experience. It's my home theater, so to speak, but it's still a theater that doesn't have assigned seating. So I'm interested to see how that works out. And I'm kind of using it. If I get there and I'm not comfortable, then I'll leave. But we'll see.
Just wear a trash bag over your head. It'll keep all the air out, so you'll be safe.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
And I've got more great ideas.
You might die too in the process.
Oh, good call. Good call. Griffin, I don't know how much it translates. What was kind of your experience in watching a movie at a drive-in theater? How was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. I've gone to drive-ins a couple times in my life, so like go to a drive-in to see a new movie was it was fun. It was refreshing. It was and I saw it late, and it was like kind of like a teen horror movie, so it was like great like summer nighttime flick and everything. So I really enjoyed that, and especially because it's like Disney's doing the new Mutants in like the Rose Bowl parking lot type thing. So we got to go to the Rose Bowl parking lot and then watch, see this big like LED screen. Like it was really nice. It wasn't projected. It was like a full blown LED screen. So the color was really crisp. And you could get the sound through your radio and it was fine. So I obviously it's not going to beat like cinematic surround sound quality, but it's fun. There's concessions there. There's like food trucks. And so, the experience was enjoyable. Again, the movie, not so much, but it didn't really matter because it was just kind of nice to go see something new on a big screen again. And then Monday will be interesting because Monday I'm driving to Vegas to go to a press screening of Tenet at 1 PM. So that's, and there's like no one else apparently there's very few critics that are going to this, press screening at the IMAX theater. So I am encouraged by that, but I also can't really judge how theaters are going to be when the masses show up. So, I don't know. I'm curious to see how that'll turn out, but I'm also just really, really happy to be seeing Tenet finally.
Yes. Yeah. The Austin press screening is Tuesday. They didn't invite us to it
What?
until Friday. Like Friday, I get out of Bill and Ted. They're like, urgent, respond within the hour. Would you be interested in a press screening of Tenet on Monday? I was like, yeah, but I mean, it has to be like at lunchtime because I'm going to go see it that night. So maybe do a double feature of Tenet, but it would have to be early because I'm seeing it that night because that's when it comes out. And then they email back like an hour later. All right, it's Tuesday at 1. Like, yeah, the movie's already out.
Lame. Like,
But what? I mean, I guess it's mildly safer because there won't be people there. But I have a bit of an aversion to, like, I don't feel in danger myself. Like, I don't have pre-existing conditions, so I feel a little bit elitist to it. Like, I need to get away from people to watch this movie. So I don't even know. It's also the opposite end of town. And our buddy, internet famous Tyler Tompkins, is flying in to watch Tenet that day. He's flying in Tuesday. Variety wrote an article about him flying in and tweeted about him. And so he invited me to see Interstellar at that exact same time. So I might travel across Austin to see Interstellar with internet famous Tyler Tompkins to watch it that day. I haven't decided yet.
I didn't realize they were doing a screenings of Interstellar like that. That'll be fun.
Yeah, this one theater in town is doing Interstellar. So Tyler's going to watch Interstellar and then take an hour off, and then he's going to go watch Tenet that night. So
quite the night.
Yeah, for real. I wish I could have seen Inception in IMAX for the 10th anniversary release because, my God, I miss seeing that movie in theaters so much. And, the original experience was like one of the best theater going experiences in my life. So I would have killed to see that.
Fun. All right, kind of moving right along. We're getting a little bit of information about box office numbers that I don't even know how to really interpret this stuff. But so the first one is that New Mutants appears to have made $7 million in the U.S. over this weekend, with 2/3 of the market closed. I hear that and I go, I don't even know what to make of that. It's a piece of information I now have. It's not total disaster. It's not the worst scenario. I just see that and I go, all right, that number happened. Griffin, do you have any thoughts on $7 million for New Mutants in light of everything going on?
So I guess that kind of tracks. I don't think people were really interested. There wasn't really marketing, and it's like, is this the movie we're going to risk our lives to go see in the theaters? I feel like the masses probably didn't care. I actually, talking to people who aren't like, ingrained in the movie stuff as much as we were, they didn't even know this movie existed. Right. So like, they're like, oh, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. And I'm like, okay, so you're probably not going to go to the theater to go see it. The thing that impressed me was Tenet made 53 million or 55 million or something around that range overseas its opening weekend.
Yeah.
That should give you an indication as to how the theatrical market is going, and everywhere else outside of the U.S. So that thing, I think, bodes really well for Tenet. And then I would also say that I feel like it's going to encourage films like No Time to Die, Dune, possibly Black Widow, and stuff like that to release, maybe using a similar sort of model to what Warner Brothers is doing with Tenet. So that film is well on its way to doing very, very well at the box office. And I'm curious to see sort of what other studios end up doing.
Yeah, that's what it looked like to me, that after Fandom last week and they didn't post a date for the release of Wonder Woman, my interpretation was they're waiting to see what Tenet does. Yeah. Like they would love to make some money in the year 2020. They just want to make sure that they're not going to lose a bunch of money by putting it out in 2020. So they're looking at what Tenet does. And you jumped ahead of me. I was looking that exact number up to make sure I said it right. But 53 million is the number that I saw from a limited number of markets. Even in these markets, not all the theaters are open, but it's a number. That's a number that has some weight to it. And so I would think that would be a very good sign. And I think with all of these movies coming out right now, I would guess that they're very likely to have good legs. There's not as many movies are coming out. People are going to like they don't want to go the opening weekend because they don't want to die. But then when they go, okay, let's see, it's out. And even their release, in a certain sense, is part of their marketing, because the marketing for these movies has just been so muted because they couldn't market the release date. And so I put out my New Mutants review, and like Griffin said, so many people are like, oh, I'd forgotten about this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, this actually came out. Is this on VOD? Is this in theaters? Where can I see this? Just people don't even know because it's for all of the obvious reasons about delays and theaters being closed. So then as soon as Tenet comes out, people like us are going to rush out to go see it, but the average Joe is just confused. But we're going to be like, hey, I actually saw it. And people are going to be like, oh, wow, that's cool. I think, I worked with teenagers 10 years ago, and Inception was in Dark Knight were just, that was defining movies of this generation, that the first for high schoolers of that time period, I guess Griffin, you would fall into that. Like this was like the era of like when they discovered like serious movies, and it created a whole generation of future Griffins as well as just average Joes that love movies too. And they're not tracking along with all this stuff comes out there. People like, I run into a church and like, hey, did this come out yet? And like say it's come out, and they go, oh, go see it this next week. So whenever I post my review, all of them are going to be like, oh, I got to go buy my tickets for Tenet. So I think that that seeing 53 million as a starting number, that seems pretty encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think
that's good. Yeah.
Whatever the US numbers are, it only becomes kind of more marketing for it, that people will talk about it and get people to go back. But, there's just nothing coming out. There's not much coming out. And they keep pushing more stuff back. Kingsman pushed back. So
True.
September's wide open for Tenet to just get people to keep going. Joe, what do you make of all of this?
The only thing that comes to mind is that, looking at the 7 million for New Mutants, that's without New York and California wholly. We get the drive-ins, of course, but I think that is it's not bad if we're looking at rural areas, or we're looking at like, not the big cities.
Right.
Because even like, thinking about here, the closest thing to me right now is Philadelphia in terms of cities, about an hour out, and their theaters aren't even open yet. So I do think that, we'll see what happens down the road. That's not bad, but you're right on with Tenet. Tenet is going to have some staying power, especially as a Christopher Nolan film, especially as one that has been teased as being like the one that was going to save the theaters when it was released back in July or whenever that was. It feels like years ago. Yeah. But it's going to be interesting to see how these movies continue to make some money down the road. I don't think 7 million for New Mutants is anywhere near where it's going to end, only because, as we said, people are going to want to see movies. And New Mutants, I think, is accessible for people with younger kids more so than it would be for, and by younger kids, I mean like, kids that aren't going to be interested in Tenet or the confusion that could come from that. So we'll see. They're not going to go see. Kids aren't going to go see The Personal History of David Copperfield. So it's going to be it's going to be Tenet or New Mutants for a little bit.
And it might.
A couple kind of expand on that just a little bit. Of that 7 million for New Mutants. The tweet I read said 2/3 of markets are closed. 2/3 of theaters are closed. So of course you have New York and California out. So immediately you're taking the two biggest like centers for this stuff, removing them. And then add to that, you had a number of major publications saying, I live in New York. I can't even see it. And then other places being like, I'm not going to go see this in public. So there's a number of things even working against it a little bit. Add to that, like the theater that's closest to me, I think did open up. And I didn't really even know that. I didn't even realize that until a day after it had opened. Yeah. And I'm watching this stuff closely, and I did not know that theater opened. So when you kind of factor things like that in, then all of the movies actually coming out, people actually going to them, is part of the re-education of the public that you can go to the movies. Yeah. And there's stuff to see. To kind of what I said before, but even adding that other layer of people are figuring this all out as we're in this very weird time period. And you just kind of gotten used to the fact if you don't even think of the fact that going to the movies is a possibility. Yeah, like a week ago, my wife and I didn't have our kids for 2 days, and we didn't even know what to go do. We legitimately just stayed at home and built shelves and watched DC Fandom. Didn't even do a date night because we're like, I don't know what we can do. Like, does this place even have somewhere where we could sit? I don't even want to worry about it. I don't go through the hassle. And so it's maybe Tenet, Christopher Nolan will save movie theaters and keep AMC from going bankrupt.
I'm banking on it, man. I'm banking on it.
We shall see. All right, we got just a couple minutes left in here, so if we can probably answer a couple of questions for you before we close on out. Shishak says, "Do you guys believe that this lockdown has shown us what movies really are and how that feeling can most be replicated on the phone or TV? The magic of the experience." It's tough to know until we see exactly where things play out on the back end of it. I think you have the side to it of movie fans just feel like we've just been missing going to the movies because we love that experience. And I think some of it is you also I think once we start having a couple movies where you go back and you're with a crowd of people and it's a great experience, you'll remember something that you lost during the lockdown. It's easy to not remember that cool experience until you're sitting there being like, oh yeah, it's awesome to be in a room full of people all laughing at the same joke. It's awesome to be in a theater and Captain America hears on your left and a portal opens behind him and everyone in the room gets chills and shivers. And you don't fully remember that until you're back there and having that experience again. So, New Mutants, that wasn't it. Bill and Ted, there was some solid laughs in the first 10 minutes that had a little taste of that, where I'm like, the sisters over here that I grew up watching Bill and Ted movies, and a friend of mine that, I've grown up since with the 5th grade. So it's pretty cool to be laughing in a theater with them. But I imagine Tenet is much more like seeing a Nolan movie, a real legitimate.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll have some of that. But I think one final thought on it. But even watching New Mutants and being like, okay, this is something that would have played better on VOD. This isn't a big spectacle cinema film.
Yeah,
That's not what this is.
It's a good point.
To everything that we've been discussing for a year now, just drop it on VOD. Just drop it on VOD. I understand why they couldn't. There's licensing, all that stuff. But I think it would have played a lot better on a small screen instead of a big screen.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different thoughts on that. Griffin, what was your take on thoughts on that?
Just going back to the theaters. I mean, yeah, I think that's, I mean, I watched Mulan last night, and watching that kind of made me miss going to the theaters, because that is a cinematic spectacle. Even though it played really well at home, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I think when we get stuff like that and we see stuff like Tenet, in theaters, it'll, people will remember why they love going to the movies again. But I again, sort of, I feel like I've said this a few times on either your show or other shows, but I think the general consumer doesn't necessarily care how they see stuff. Yeah. Like, they're perfectly fine watching these things at home, from the comfort of their own home on their own, 4K TVs or whatever, with their own sound systems. So I don't know. I mean, like, you can't really replicate the experience of seeing Endgame in theater for the first time at home. And I think, like, big event movies will always be big event movies, and there will always be a draw to them. But stuff like New Mutants, I mean, like, people who didn't even know that was the thing to begin with, they're not going to go rush out to see it. They're not going to care, and they'll just watch it on VOD. And again, going off of what you said, Sean, and I think something that we've been saying this entire pandemic is that should have just been a VOD film. And Disney has the money where they probably could have bought out the clause there just to release it on, VOD or whatever, made a deal with HBO or whatever, it wasn't the movie to, get people to return to the cinemas. So,
yeah. And Joe, what was your take on this one?
Right there with you. We had a discussion last night during one of the watch-alongs that sometimes when you're watching a film, it's all about the mindset that you're in and kind of how your day was and all of that, right? You can watch a movie one day and not like it, and then watch it another day and catch other things because maybe your attention span is different, and you're actually, following the ins and outs of the film. So I think that's one thing that I'm looking forward to with getting back to the theaters on a more consistent basis. Is I do think that there's something lost with watching certain films at home, and being able to just pick up my phone or sitting here at my desk while watching a movie and maybe getting distracted. You miss out on something. So I look forward to that sort of date night with myself, because I love going to the movies by myself, and it's kind of like my anxiety treatment, right? Like it's my night out. So stress relief, all that stuff.
So it'll be interesting to see how the next 2 days play out as we get to actually see Tenet in a theater, and I think that one will, for all of us, be a however we feel on the movie, which I would guess we'll fall in the category that likes it. However that lands, that's the one that'll feel like,
no, we're back.
We're back. We are home. This is what we've been waiting for. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in for today's episode of the podcast. And thank you, Joe, for hosting us here on the film festival. And Griffin, now that you're back, where can we find you on the internet?
Listen, I was waiting for this to happen the entire time. Again, shoddy internet, awful, whatever. But yeah, Joe, thanks again for having me on. Well, for having both John and I on. I think what you're doing here with the festival is fantastic, and I hope that it proves to be a success so that you can do it again next year. But yeah, if you guys are interested in checking out all the ramblings that I have to say, you can follow me on Twitter at Griff Schiller, or you can check out the Film Speak channel. I should have my review up for Tenet, either tomorrow if I'm really feeling dedicated, or maybe Tuesday. Again, I have to drive like a total of 8 hours, so maybe leaning more towards Tuesday. But yeah, check out the Film Speak channel for all the stuff I got going on there.
Joe, where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, after the festival and all that, it's going to be Guy at the Movies on Instagram and guyatthemovies.com. Also, random musings on Guy at the Movies 1 on Twitter.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. And keep talking movies.